Hello students, you usually find answering intertextual questions quite difficult. So today I have come up with a video which will explain you how to answer these intertextual questions in a very simple way. So these are 5-mark long question answers which are part of your literature section C. Now let us understand how to reply or respond to these questions. So first of all, let us understand what are intertextual questions. In these type of questions, examiner wants you to compare two different chapters just in one question. He can ask you to compare the themes or the characters from two different poems, or it can be from two different proses, right? Now you need to understand the deeper meaning or the theme or the messages of each and every chapter very clearly. You should not just superficially read the chapters, you need to understand the chapter fully. So not even just reading the summaries will solve your problem. So these are the questions in which the examiner is testing your critical thinking skills as well as your analytical skills. So don't panic. These are in fact quite easy to answer if you follow this 5-step formula which I am telling you today. So first of all, I must say that you take the screenshot of this complete slide because this is your master formula to understand how to answer them. First of all, the first step which states that identify. Now what we need to identify, the examiner wants us to identify the common theme which he has asked you in the question. So that we have to state in step 1. And then you have to explain the same theme taking an example of the character from chapter 1, and the same theme you have to explain using an example from chapter 2 which is already given to you in the question. And step 4, which is quite important in scoring, here you have to give the similarities and the contrasts between the characters or the text that you are comparing, and then in the end or the last step is to conclude. Now what do you mean by conclude? Here means what did you learn from the themes after reading both the chapters, your understanding or the message which the chapters wants to convey. This is what you have to write in conclusion, your learning from your chapters. So I hope you have understood the formula, and now we'll explain it step by step by taking one of the examples. Now let us understand one of the official CBSE questions from your previous papers. The question is, how do the characters of Sophie, which is one of the characters of your chapter Going Places, and Subbu from Poets and Pancakes, compare and contrast in terms of their aspirations, constraints, and the pursuit of their dreams? Now what you have to do is, you have to compare Sophie and Subbu on the basis of their aspirations, constraints, and the way they pursued their dreams. So I hope the question is clear. Now let us apply our 5-step formula on this question to solve it. Step 1, that is identify and introduce. We have understood the main theme which we have to identify, that is the theme basis on which we have to compare and contrast Sophie and Subbu, that is their aspirations and constraints to pursue their dreams. So this is your step 1. Now let us understand by taking an example from chapter 1 about Sophie. Sophie, her aspirations were to open a boutique, she wanted glamour, and she was a great fan of Tenny Cafe. But what were her constraints? That she belonged to a poor family background. Now then how did she pursue her dreams? She pursued her dream by just escaping into fantasy and just by daydreaming, right? So this is what you have to mention in step 1 about Sophie. Now let us understand character 2, that is Subbu from the chapter Poets and Pancakes. Now what was his aspirations? He wanted to be a respectful artist in the Gemini studio where he worked. That we come to know when we read the chapter thoroughly. Now what were the constraints that were creating hurdles for him? That was the office politics, hierarchy, and the people who were jealous of him. Now, how did he pursue his dreams? He followed a practical way, he worked hard and helped everyone, right? So we come to know how both the characters, they pursue their dreams, but their ways were different. So this is where you have to score marks. You have to tell the examiner both the characters had certain dreams, but the way they followed or they achieved their dreams were different. One, that is Sophie, she believed in escapism and fantasy without action, whereas Subbu, he was more practical and adapted the real world environment. Finally, step 5. How do we conclude? What did we learn? We learned that dreaming is great, but dreaming without actions like Sophie will lead to unfulfilled desires and sadness. But if we combine the efforts with the dreams, just like Subbu, it will lead to success. Now this is our final draft, and let us understand all the 5 steps that we have followed. So coming up to step 1, that is identify and introduce the theme. That is, both Sophie from Going Places and Subbu from Poets and Pancakes are characters with strong aspirations who face significant constraints. So their stories explore the challenges individuals encounter when striving to achieve their goals. This is our step 1, that is identify and introducing the theme. Now explaining with respect to character 1, that is Sophie dreams of a glamorous life beyond her working class background. However, her family's financial limitations restrict her opportunities. Despite the impracticality, she indulges in her fantasies as a coping mechanism instead of taking real action. So this is by explaining chapter 1, step 2, right? Now step 3 will be explaining the example of Subbu. A character in the film industry aspires to be a successful and respected artist. He faces professional jealousy and the hierarchical studio system. Subbu remains dedicated to his work, adapting the challenges by being resourceful and collaborative. So this we have explained, taking example from chapter 2, which is our step 3, and the step 4. Across the 2 stories, both characters dream of achieving more and encounter barriers, which is their similarities. However, means to show the examiner that now you are doing the contrast. Their approach is opposite. Sophie escapes into fantasy without taking practical steps, remaining unfulfilled. Subbu actively works within his environment to realize his ambitions, achieving success and respect. So this is our scoring step 4, where we do the contrast and tell the similarities. And finally, the conclusion, that is the learning. That is, the comparison reveals that the approach to overcoming constraints significantly impacts the outcome, right? So Sophie's reliance on fantasy highlights the dangers of escapism. Subbu's proactive engagement illustrates that perseverance can lead to success. The stories teach us the importance of coupling dreams with efforts. So this is our learning by understanding 2 characters of different chapters in one question. I hope the things are very simple and clear and easy for you to answer now. So finally, this is your 5-mark show shot. Then again recapping what we did, identified the theme, explaining chapter 1, explaining chapter 2, doing the contrast and comparison, and then concluding by telling the examiner what did we learn. So practice, practice and practice.